Hi, Fiona. Welcome to our first podcast on all things neuroscience and our regular mulling sessions.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for welcoming me in today. I'm really looking forward to this chance to sort of dig deep into some of the topics we've got today and going ahead as well. So it'd be great to really have some time to do that with you.
It will, won't it? I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, we've got a few ideas lined up, so we'll do some of those as we go along.
Yeah.
But I thought today we'd start with a big one, really, and that is the idea of concentration and cognitive fatigue. So how do we concentrate? What's the, if we can define that, what will be the kind of the neuroscience definition of concentration?
Yeah.
And the flip side of that is, because we can only concentrate for so long, is, when we become cognitive fatigue, what does that look like, and how do we overcome it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think one that actually we don't in day-to-day sort of parlance ever talk about or think about, do we? We just assume that it comes to you naturally, and therefore you can just suddenly switch into concentration. I think this morning I was reminded of how hard it is to get yourself into a zone when you're trying to juggle several things. And being the nerd that I am, looking at the neuroscience behind that makes me realize that when you are trying to do multiple things, juggling, home, family, children, people asking you questions, planning for somebody to come at the weekend type thing, what we're then doing is overloading our brain so that it isn't able to access the executive function part of your brain, the bit that does the considered thinking, logical thinking, problem solving, solution finding. And you just suddenly go, I'm on a podcast in a minute. Okay. Yeah, right. Let's get into the zone. And I think you realise that what you slowly have to do, because it's like a sensory overwhelm, isn't it, when you feel like that? If you think that actually all of those things that I just talked about are stacking up, and what they're asking you to do is neural switch, and you're switching from one thing to another, is that what you don't have is that space to just go and relax. Okay, what am I going to do now is I'm switching on my ability to think more rationally and consider and get into that critical ability, which is right here at the front of my head, as we know, in the prefrontal cortex. So I had a really good life example of that this morning. But,
really?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hearing two things there. I'm hearing about task loading and task switching, and they're two really interesting topics, aren't they? I mean, and we could potentially have a podcast on those just on their individually, can't we? But task loading is that sense of, doing lots and lots and lots of things, all competing for the same amount of brain space that we have, and we're trying to hold all of those in our head at one time, which then takes us into that whole idea of task switching. This notion of multitasking, which if we can, get into the old stereotypes of, men are supposed to be notoriously poor at multitasking and women are supposed to be notoriously brilliant at.
It's a myth.
It is, isn't it?
None of us are good at it. None of us. We just think we are, which is actually not a good thing in itself. Believing that you can.
Well, I mean, and that goes into a cognitive bias, doesn't it? But and I guess I suppose I'm really interested in right now is about, and I suppose what I'm thinking about is the definition. If we could define, from a neurological point of view, what would be the definition of concentration?
Okay. So
I've got one in my head.
Yeah, go on. You tell me yours, and we'll share. We'll share stories.
Share stories. So I think concentration, from a neuroscience perspective, is the brain's ability to maintain focus and attention in a specific situation or environment. So, you know,
Yeah.
I'm going to concentrate on just this podcast or writing an essay, and I can do that for a period of time.
And I really like some of the things you said there. I think, yeah, it's those two things, isn't it? Focus and attention. Really, I think if you're going to get into that concentration, focus and attention are the key, the big names, if you like, the big names in lights. But the other thing that you said is, I'm just going to focus on this. And I think it's that one thing, it's that focusing on the one thing and getting into that space of that one thing sort of goes alongside that concentration. So in essence, what we're doing with the brain is we're actually going, right, spotlight's down onto this one thing. And you can almost feel it happen, can't you? It's, you know, you're jazzing about doing multiple things, but actually go, right, now's the time. Okay, at 11 o'clock, I'm going to focus on this one thing. How do I switch my brain into that place? What do I need to think about? And so it's a brilliant organ, really, when you think about it. Even some of the gestures we might make are about that vision. You know, even the hand gestures I'm making is like we're honing down and we're focusing onto this one thing. Is, if you look at where my hands are, actually they've become blinkers.
Well, I was just thinking
things.
Metaphorical blinkers. Yeah.
And to being able to focus and get your attention onto one thing, I think it's about unlocking the brain's need to be going, oh, look at that squirrel over there. Oh, look at that email. Look at that. Because what all those things do is they widen our view, our brain function, and we are not then focusing. It's distracting us. And when you think about the things that can distract us on the day-to-day, the world's just a distraction machine now.
It is, isn't it?
It really is. And I think it's just trying to understand what are those things that get in the way so that we can really get the best out of our prefrontal cortex. And it is all that moving it forward. How do we get there? What we don't want is to throw in stuff that activates our amygdala, because we're in like threat space then, aren't we? But what we also don't want to do is get our brain bored, so it wants some distraction and novelty. And I think that's where you're alluding to those shorter lengths of time that the brain can focus for. I think that's really interesting.
It is, isn't it? And we have that. There's the phrase, not the phrase. There's the term, isn't it? Ultradian, like circadian. The ultradian rhythm of we naturally have 90-minute focus cycles, and it's almost like, you know, and we know that also from sleep. We have 90-minute sleep cycles, don't we? Generally coupled together. If anybody has ever done a training course, then typically we, you know, as trainers, we know that much more than 90 minutes, people's attention starts to wander. And that's that same thing, isn't it? So we know at some level that, you know, 90 minutes is a really comfortable attention span. Much longer than that, then it becomes really difficult.
Yeah, and even I think there's been even more work done on how long we can stay in focus. And I agree, like 90 minutes of solid focus is probably one that's accessible to most people. But if we wanted to hack the brain even more, what we do is we give it a little rest in between. And so we sort of chunk it down into 25 minutes of focused attention, 5 minutes of messing with your phone or staring out the window, and back onto it. And that's what things like the Pomodoro technique do. And that's kind of hacking your brain. I think important to remember is that your brain is energy intensive. And you know, I think we were talking about this the other day we were talking about spoons and the spoon theory, which we can probably chat about in a minute, but it's knowing how much energy am I beginning the day with? What do I need that real focused attention on? How am I going to hack my brain to be able to get that? And I guess being stricter with yourself so that you go, right, at this time, I'm going to begin my work on this thing. And I'm going to use the Pomodoro technique because what I know from what I was just saying about the energy intensive nature of the brain is it fatigues quite quickly. So just giving it a little boost, little wander about, and then back on it. I think that's a great way of hacking it. I've used that technique for quite a long time. But that said, I think it's getting into the space of, I'm going to use this technique, but actually there are some things I need to put in place to be able to do that. And I think, spoon theory is really interesting. We were chatting about this, and I like it.
I love this. I love the idea of spoon theory, and it's and I was first introduced to it around the whole notion of chronic fatigue syndrome. And if we say that we have an arbitrary number, so we say 12 spoons, don't we? If we have 12 spoons in a day, how do we, and it might be that getting up, getting dressed, having breakfast, getting out of the house for a particular time might take a spoon. It might even take 2 spoons. And somebody with physical ill health, it might take more than that. So and we know that, actually, don't we? If we've ever had cold or flu and you're really not in it, but you've got to go to work, what can seem like a reasonably simple task can suddenly be like, a third or even half your spoons in one fell swoop.
Yeah.
And then if we have to have really challenging conversations, and I know we've talked about this, haven't we, of where whatever that conversation is, but it's really energy intensive.
It might be
a negotiation or whatever that might be, that could take up a significant chunk of our spoons, and then and then what do we have left?
I think, it's great. It's good. I know it works with chronic fatigue. I sort of looked at using it myself just in work in the past, because I think what happens is we can't spend all of our spoons at work. We actually have a life outside of that. And I think it's being able to identify where your spoons, where you want to employ your spoons today. I have a big piece of work to do that's energy intensive. I've only got this many spoons, so how am I going to make some of that happen? I think it's those brain hacks, isn't it? I think it's really interesting.
It is, isn't it? And I think there's also something about whether it's possible to recharge your spoon drawer and recover a spoon.
Earn it back.
Earn it back, yeah. So I guess there is something about, if we constantly go from one event to another, or event or activity, whatever you want to call it, then we're constantly spending and we're constantly paying out, and that's another way of from neuroscience, we talk about the body budget, don't we? Of sometimes coming, or even if we use the Pomodoro app, of taking time at the end of our focus session to get up, walk about, and recharge. Recharge.
I think that's vitally important. You know what it's like when you're working to a deadline. We all have them at some point, and that's going to be an intense day. If you're anything like me in business, you have to sometimes write bids for contracts and things like that. The deadlines are always tight, and you've got to drive through no matter what. But you can't get into concentration. You can't get into deep focus because you're probably tired, for one, which doesn't help if you're going to expend more energy. We know deep focus takes more energy than all the jazzy about answering your emails, that sort of thing. They're easy. They take less energy. They're things that we can. So the thing about them, though, is they're easy and they give us satisfaction because we finish them quickly. So it's like, oh, yeah, look at that. Tick that off my list. That's brilliant. But the deep focus to one big thing over there is much harder because it takes effort. It takes that effort to be able to start the concentration. So it's thinking about some of those things you're talking about, like the brain body budget. If I'm going to do this late night, head down, I've got to get it done. Are there some things I can do to recharge my spoon drawer before I get there?
Yeah.
So I'm sure you'll have some ideas about this, but we know going outside, opening up our peripheral vision, immediately calms down the brain, the parasympathetic nervous system, all of that.
Yeah.
And by spacing like that, by spacing your day out, you then can reset.
Yeah, we naturally, don't we? When we go outside, we naturally move our eyes left and right as we become more attuned to our outside environment. And we also know from things like EMDR that left to right eye movement is quite a calming, has quite a calming effect on us, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because what essentially we're doing is we are checking out the world for danger.
Yeah.
And because our eyes face forward, that's why we sort of look left and right. If you look at some animals with the eyes on the sides of the head, they actually bob about. I'm thinking of some wood pigeons in my back garden. They bob about like this before they do anything. But we don't realise that actually we're built also to check that we're not under threat.
Yeah.
These days, a lot of our threats are hidden, aren't they? We don't see them, but we do look for them. So going outside and going, yeah, actually, I've got this big wide open space. I'm thinking of the part of the country that you live in, and I know coming over there just the other day, and I saw this big sky views, and I was like, oh, that just feels great to be able to see that big sky. Why does it feel good? Because I can see everywhere.
Yeah.
And there's nothing hiding in a bush. Not that I know of anyway. Yeah. So it's trying to do that and calm yourself, like you say.
Right. So I'm guessing what I'm hearing in there is about, when we've been in a really energy intensive environment, conversation, whether that's a business negotiation or some sort of disciplinary type of an event, or you've been really concentrating on getting a bid in for a tender. Then by changing our environment and getting up and moving around, by moving around, we start to release things like norepinephrine, don't we? For getting our body moving, which then helps our brain refocus. Getting up and looking in a different environment gives us a bit of a time away from the concentration, and it also helps us reset, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you were talking about concentration and cognitive fatigue as well. So, and the spoons sort of lean into that, recognizing cognitive fatigue. Yeah. I don't know about you, but have you ever tried to do something urgently that induces a lot of anxiety, or deal with something like that and then do something else? So I was in this highly charged, stressful situation once where I was trying to deal what was in front of me. I used to work in inpatient units and that. Trying to deal with that situation, and it just takes all of your energy and concentration to sort of interpret what's going on, preempt what your next move's going to be. And then I had to make a phone call at the same time, and I could not use the phone. And I think, that's a really good example of, if you're in that place, and it could be through multitasking we end up in that place. So we've actually drawn our attention away from the prefrontal cortex. We then can't function properly. Yeah.
There's I'm loving that. And that's really interesting. I think that is super, super interesting, because we're so task focused. We're used all of our available processing.
Yeah. So it's all used up.
Yeah. And then trying to then bring up another piece of information of, how do I use this? How do I have this, this piece of equipment? It is really demanding, isn't it? Because we're then having to then, which bit of information do I have to shut down or forget? Yeah. To then bring this one on board. And that's super, super interesting.
And that's that neural switching, isn't it? So when you're in that situation, and we do, it depends on what job you do or what you're dealing with. We do get into those situations, and they fatigue you immensely.
Yeah.
So I think afterwards you'll see people go, oh,
yeah,
I just feel really tired after that. Yeah.
There was
excuse me.
And one of the things that's just reminded me of is a coaching situation a little while ago where there was and again it was taken from a mental health unit where I was talking with somebody, but there was a situation where a manager was then asked to or had to make a phone call for an ambulance, and I think what was really interesting in this is the dispatch person said, go away at the bottom of the drive to make sure that the ambulance knows where to come. Now, rather than delegating that task, because they were so overloaded by that situation, they, as the and I would use the term orchestrator of managing difficult situations.
Yeah.
They'd isolated themselves away because they were following the task. They were following what was being asked of them, thinking that they were helping, but had unwittingly left the team unorchestrated.
Yeah.
So, and the situation was dealt with. The ambulance got there, and that was all good. But I think that's really interesting from what you're saying there about, being, when we're so task focused and task loaded, that sometimes the only thing we can do is follow the schema, follow the path.
Yeah.
Because then having to think about something different takes more energy or more processing space than we have.
Yeah. And what we also find is often switching back to where you were is really difficult then. So I think that's like something for people to have a think about when they're wanting to deep focus or get into flow, as we call it, is if you get pulled, allow yourself to get pulled out of that several times, you are going to use more energy, and then the neural switching process gets harder. So you can't then get back onto focus. And then, I mean, there's a phenomenon in focus and focus, attention, and flow, which is called the struggle. And at the beginning of any period of focus, we have to go through this barrier. It's like hitting the wall on running. When I don't know if you've ever run or done any exercise that's prolonged, you get to a point where you go, I'm out of this. I can't do this. I remember once I was doing some mountain climbing, which I used to do when I was younger. We were going up a Via Ferrata. It was really steep. It was quite scary. And about 20 minutes in, I hit the wall or the struggle. I was like, I'm out of this. I can't do this. And you have to be able to ride through that to then get into a rhythm of flow. So same with a piece of concentration. You will hit the struggle at the beginning. It's the brain's way of going, I'm not using all my energy on this. This is far too far. And it's how you deal with that, isn't it? It's how you get through that struggle.
Would a more kind of regular term for that be like you getting your second wind?
Yeah.
Kind of just, and then you kind of get into the zone, as it were.
Yeah. And we know that trying to create, so it's about creating an environment where we don't take ourselves off in multiple directions. B, we don't try and do it for too long. So we've got like a plan around those breaks, those brain breaks. And C is acknowledging that there will be a struggle, or you will need to get your second wind, but you've got to be able to overcome that and know that it happens. And I think for me, until I'd realised that was a thing, I'd often get stuck at that place, and my creative juices have stopped flowing. My interest in the task is not there because I'm not getting a reward and it's too hard. And actually, that's your brain's way of conserving energy. It's going too hard. I'm not using all that energy up. Thank you very much. I'm going to introduce the struggle, and let's see if you can get beyond that. So it's having a plan really of how we get beyond that and how we get beyond distraction.
Right. So so we get the initial dopamine rush has then started to wear off, and then and then our focus starts to wander, doesn't it? And it, you know, becomes less novel. That's interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so which then makes me think then of what would be some great strategies for trying to deal with that, and you know, managing our cognitive fatigue and helping us stay focused.
I mean, a lot of what we've been talking about is self-awareness, I think.
Yeah.
I think until you're aware of how the brain functions and what to expect, you may not always catch it up to its tricks. It's a really clever organ. Essentially, it's about our survival. And, you know, it loves a bit of reward and a bit of novelty, but it's about keeping us going, keeping us safe. If we got back down to the pure foundations. So it's enabling it to not feel like you're taxing it too much. Because that then makes it think, oh, I know it doesn't think like on its own like that, but it's actually then trying to preserve energy. So you are in a constant battle with your brain around that energy. In case, you know, if we need to go and do something really quickly, it wants to keep energy aside from that. So one is that self-awareness. How tired am I to undertake this task? It's a big, deep, focused task, and I've got to produce this thing. Yeah, all day I've been like multitasking and switching and doing all of this stuff, and I've worn myself out. I've burnt through my spoons. I've got one left. So one thing we could do, if you wanted to use spoon theory, is arrange your spoons around sort of what's priority and difficulty, and how many spoons, and what time of day am I going to do that? When do I work best? When do I have most energy?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? And we often know that that, you know, early morning, where we're kind of, you know, we've got most energy, is probably where we get to do our deep thinking, our deep focus. And there's Cal Newport, Dr. Cal Newport. He talks about that, doesn't he? And in fact, he's got a really interesting book about deep focus. And he talks about doing all your deep mulling, your deep concentration stuff, your hard work in the morning when
you've got kind of energy. I suppose that's kind of based on whether you had a good night's sleep or not. But
well, that's true. Yeah,
taking those things into consideration is 100% the way to go, really. But I don't think we do that as a habit. I don't think we're kind of disciplined enough to do that unless we've got that self-awareness. And so I think it's about helping people to become aware of themselves and when they work best. I can't remember the analogy, but are you a skylark or an owl? Do you work best in the morning, or are you best in the evening? And so that's a part of self-awareness. But, you know, if you're an owl and you've been out all day and you shouldn't have been, because actually you work best at twilight, you're going to be a tired owl in the evening. So it's about plugging in that energy, isn't it?
It is. I love it. I love that. Yeah. I think that's a really interesting one. Yeah, you a skylark or a night owl. Yeah. And I mean, briefly, kind of just taking it back to, and I'm just thinking about, you know, neurotransmitters of and the acetylcholine that's often brought about, and that gets less as we get older, and we know that that's a particular hormone that's really that we use quite a lot in concentration and memory formation. And so I guess there's also something about recognizing that, you know, as we get older, it might be a little bit trickier for us to concentrate for so long. And actually, maybe that there is something about, if we've had a really busy day and we've used all of our spoons and potentially even dragged a few over from the following day, then maybe we need to go easy and recognize that, you know, we don't have, you know, if we said 12, we don't have 12 today because we used 13 yesterday, so I may only have 11, or maybe even only have 10. So, and actually, there's another. Sorry, go on.
Sorry, no, it was making me think about when we met together as a team the other day, and we'd spent a whole day. It was a brilliant day, really interesting. We were thinking about, where we're going with our company and some of the great trainings that we're developing. But it was 4 o'clock, so we've been talking since 9:30 in the morning with a little break. And we were still really eager to carry on, but I looked at us all and we were kind of like, I went, I think we might be done here. And that was a brilliant day. It was great. And I think it's being able to recognize that actually our work here is done today.
Yeah.
And we've got all of that wonderful stuff that we've been talking about. And actually calling it a halt there and sort of summing up, what you then do is you trigger your brain to start we call it mulling, don't we, Dave? It's like thinking it over. And that's when you become creative and have these ideas.
Yeah.
So on my way home in the car, which was like a nearly 3-hour journey, I was like going, oh, what about this and that? And I've just thought, so it's good to sort of sow the seeds of and what next, isn't it?
What next? Yeah.
But if you kept hammering at it, you wouldn't get into your what next. I don't think. You'd just be all asleep, tired, needing some energy.
And that's, do you know what? That's really making me, it's really resonating with something I do in coaching of, I always start the conversation with, where do we want to be at the end of this conversation? And I guess maybe that's a thing that we ought to be doing in our day. Where do we need to be at the end of our day? And actually, when we've met our quota, our target, maybe that's a point where we go, okay, I've done what I need to do. I can set it down now, rather than keeping going. And and then we never get to enough downtime, and that potentially leads to burnout.
And I think that's the important thing we're talking about here. Is we talked about cognitive fatigue earlier, which everybody gets to at some point, versus what happens when we get into that chronic sustained stress and fatigue situation. That's very different, isn't it? It's hard to pull yourself out of that. And you're talking about burnout, and essentially that's where we've got to. It's become chronic. And we know when we're in that place and cortisol is really high in our system constantly, then actually trying to focus and do anything else is really hard.
Yeah.
I'm
good. And while we're on that then, so, we also know that if we have a poor night's sleep, that we often that we can have extended amounts of cortisol in our system. If we've had a particularly stressful situation, then that releases cortisol into our system. And we know that cortisol has a direct impact on our prefrontal cortex. It's really susceptible to that, isn't it? So so then we get a reduced ability to then problem solve and deal
access that part of your brain. And I think, when we have that level of cortisol in our system, what we're doing is we're on constant alert. So we're ready for action. We're ready to like scarper or do whatever we have to do, which means you don't use this thinking bit of your brain, this deep problem solving bit of your brain. You're just ready to go. You're like, I'm out of here.
And it's because we can't access it, we fall back on the autonomic system, don't we? That the emotional part of our brain, the basal ganglia stuff, that's all of that bit that is
priming habitual. Us to move really quickly. We don't need to think, we just want action.
But even if we're not massively triggered to a fight or flight response, we're still resorting to the schema, the things that we know that are automatic. And the problem with automatic is, and that leads us into cognitive biases, doesn't it?
I mean, it's probably another podcast.
It is, isn't it? But that's it can give us, it will get us through 80% of the time, but it can potentially lead us down or to make an error.
Well, it's a case of getting through, isn't it? Like you say, getting through is a really important thing here, is that if we are pulling on those bits that we've got stored in our system, so the schemas, so we're working on a theme of, okay, we know this worked last time, so we'll probably use that again. We're not really thinking, is it actually going to happen in this situation? Is it going to be useful? Is it going to be valuable? So we want to move away from using those like workarounds, the biases, the schemas in deep work. So I think some of the other tools perhaps are trying to reduce distraction as much as you can. Recognize what's around you. You know, are you going to be distracted by your phone, your emails? Do you use two screens? Have you got your emails open on one of them?
Yeah.
You're trying to deep focus. Have you? I'm terrible for looking out the window. I'm pointing over there. I've got a really nice window there I can look out of, and I'll suddenly go, oh, something's happening out there. So, you know, how do you block that out? So it's trying to think about, how do I focus? I'm going to focus like for 25 minutes now, and I'll be disciplined around that. So I'm not going to look out the window. I'm not going to look at my phone. Having that discipline is really important. It's an important habit to sort of wire in, I think.
Yeah.
And one experiment you can do, if you've got a smartphone, one of these, your worst enemy for flow, just put it to the side, but put it face down.
Okay,
and during your 25 minutes of flow, note how many times you go to reach for it.
Interesting.
It's really interesting how many times you'll go to tap that screen to wake it up if you've got a waking up phone. I was terrible.
Really?
I have to put it over there, away from my arm's length.
Out of arm's reach.
Yeah, it's thinking about those things. And also these things, another enemy.
Yeah.
Mine buzzes and tells me I've got to stand up, and that's taking me out of my flow. Yeah. So, and
that's and there's even a term for that now, isn't there? Digistraction of that. We're constantly.
It's like a pandemic. It's the new pandemic, I think, is that because we like novelty and we like to be distracted, and you know, if we're in different sort of time, we might be looking for those distractions because actually they're telling us that we may be under threat and we've got to move or whatever. We're looking for that twig breaking or that, you know, that shadow in the bush or whatever it is. But when we're trying to get into flow and we know we're safe, we need to remove that distraction. And also the novelty aspect. That's about how we release those lovely chemicals that we like around sort of reward and excitement. It's about novelty does that, but it's a very short-lived thing and it takes you out of your flow. So it's getting into the habit of 25-minute blocks, maybe with a break, but also you were saying earlier about rewards or goals, like your goals for the day.
So I think I think that's a really interesting thing, isn't it? So I guess all of the stuff that we've talked about, what I'm hearing is that deep focus is really powerful and really useful, but we can only do it for a finite amount of time. Yeah. I'm hearing that what will help us protect ourselves from things like, you know, cognitive fatigue and potentially burnout is about allowing ourselves to focus, but taking regular breaks, and listen to our body when it's telling us that it's struggling. And
that's self-awareness, really, isn't it? Of how tired am I? And developing that.
Yeah. And there's a Tim Galway, who's one of the fathers of modern day coaching, that says, you know, your performance is equal to your current potential minus the interruptions. And I think that's really interesting, that current potential, because today's potential might not be the same as yesterday's potential.
And so I guess sometimes we do just have to get things done. It's about creating an environment where we can just get the one thing done. I think that's great. I think, you know, those tips and hints and brain hacks are really good. And I think, you know, it's also about perhaps delving into this deeper, which I guess we'll do in future podcasts around some of the things we're talking about, cognitive bias and schemas and
absolutely. So I think that's a really good place to bring this to a close. I guess one of the things that'd be really useful then, I think, would be, you know, for whoever our listeners are out there, if you're watching this, is to, you know, if you have a topic that you think you'd like us to cover from a coaching and neuroscience and leadership angle, then you know, drop us a line or add a comment in the in wherever you found this, and we'll endeavour to have a conversation or a mull. We'll mull it over, as we often say, and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, I think that was a really interesting conversation, Dave, and thanks for making this podcast happen. And I think if anyone wants to send us their brain hacks for concentration, again, drop it into the comments, or DM us, or whatever it is that you like to do. We're always keen to hear your things that work, and also to share them with other people. So thank you.
Brilliant. Well, awesome. Well, thank you very much. And we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, see you on the next one.